So, starting today, we'd like to talk to now Fernando Bermudez. We're very lucky to talk to him. He was jailed wrongly for 18 years, almost 20 years in prison for a murder that he didn't commit. And then now we finally get to hear your story. We get to hear your side of the story and have you really tell us what it was like for you. So, just before we begin, can you tell me how did everything happen? Can you tell me the details, and then we'll get further into it?
Sure. Well, the summer of 1991 was one of the happiest times of my life, but it was a time when my life spun out of control when I was arrested for a crime I did not commit. At gunpoint, while my mother screamed, I'm yanked into a police car and sent to a precinct where I'm asked what I did on the night of August 3rd and 4th, 1991. Well, I quickly remembered that I was celebrating my enrollment in college with my friends. My college is set to begin actually that fall. And that summer, my classes were canceled. I tell my truth, which is that I wasn't even at the club, and that I'm with my friends, all of whom came to the precinct. And I was shocked when I wasn't believed. I end up being sent to Rikers Island, which is a horrible place of 14,000 yelling and screaming violent inmates. And there I'm forced to endure a trial in order to prove my innocence further. I'm unaware, according to proven evidence, that there had been coercion and threats of witnesses, which we later would prove, in which the witnesses were given deals in exchange for their testimony. The charges against them, unrelated and related to this case, would be dismissed. I'm shocked when I lose my trial and I'm given a life sentence and sent to an upstate New York prison where after a year at Rikers Island, horrible as that was, I'm forced to endure another 17 years in prison where I seek to prove my innocence.
Now, those years that you spent there in prison, could you tell us what it was like? What kind of things did you have to endure while you were there?
Well, I had to endure the humiliation and indignity of strip searches, of being physically assaulted while I'm there by both inmates and correctional guards. It was a very difficult circumstance that tested the very essence of my humanity. I grew very sad and very depressed, particularly when I established evidence of my innocence early on, because the witnesses had, according to their conscience, revealed the reasons why they lied on purpose and why they were threatened. So I felt that this situation would be resolved sooner rather than later, and I was in for a rude awakening again and again while being denied. So it tested the very metal of who I was, and it hurt me deeply because I believed in the American criminal justice system, and I grew disillusioned, realizing that the situation would grow more complicated as I lost appeal after appeal. I tried to maintain my faith. I prayed. I battled thoughts of suicide, and I overcame that. And one of the sources was the love of my wife, who stood by me throughout my years, who gave me beautiful children, and together we fought the good fight to try to make the truth prevail as soon as possible. I was able to obtain pro bono attorneys who believed in me and started working free of charge. And this was an amazing development because they came in early on and it should have made a difference, but the court refused to listen, refused to even grant an evidentiary hearing as the years ticked by and time crawled in his hands and knees. And it was very depressing and just living around a very violent place in a 6 by 9 foot cell that I could basically touch the walls if I stretched out my arms. And so I just tried to survive. I educated myself, and I just sought at every turn to write as many letters as I could, crying for help.
Now, when you were in that cell, the cell you were just describing, what kind of thoughts were in your head? What were you thinking? You tried to educate yourself, but you were in there for something that you weren't even there when it happened. What were you thinking you had a lot of time to think about it. What were you thinking about?
Well, I was just thinking that when am I going to get out of here? I mean, am I going to die in prison? That's what I thought, because there was so much violence around me that I thought that, well, someone could be just as delusional as the next person I've encountered and moved away from, that I could die in this place. Tomorrow is not promised. So there was always a level of it, I admit, fear in such a negative place with so many negative emotions running, from idleness to just negative emotions across the board. And I just wondered when I was going to get out. I wondered when would finally the truth prevail. I mean, I would look at those cold steel bars in front of my cell And they would just be there every morning when I went to sleep and I woke up, and I would see them right there, impenetrable as they were. And I would say, well, when is this door going to open up and I'm going to be a free man? When can I finally go home to my wife and children and help support them? Because my wife was struggling with our children, facing homelessness, poverty, and so much. I grew very, very depressed, and the only way I could overcome that was by exercising my faith and believing that if I continued fighting, that the truth would prevail with the help that I continued accumulating over the years.
Are you religious?
Yes, I consider myself a Christian. I consider myself a person who believes in God, who had, I think, a particular plan for this situation. We might question suffering in life, but it's something that I felt that I couldn't necessarily question, because for which there would be no answer. Instead, what I had to do was believe that my situation was happening for a reason, and that I would prevail if I just maintained and remained patient and courageous in fighting against what I felt was almost an impenetrable darkness at times.
Now, going back to the beginning, when you had the police come to your house at gunpoint and they were telling you you were accused of this crime, you did something that you didn't do. What was it? Did you have any knowledge of the incident that happened before that? What did you think? What did your family think when that happened?
Well, I was shocked. I was shocked because I didn't know why I was being arrested. I honestly did not know. And I just heard my mother screaming from our second floor window. And I was just like, wow, okay, there's a misunderstanding. The situation's going to get resolved. I'll be home by that night. When I was arrested 2 days later, August 6, 1991. And I said, okay, I'll be home. And then the situation grew complicated. It just, wow, it grew worse. I mean, I was forced to sit down in a lineup. And later I would learn that one of the reasons that happened was because the witness the suspect that the witnesses described is alleged to have stood 5'11", 165 pounds versus my 6'2", 220 pound stature. And so I was told to sit down, but even then I still thought, okay, this is going to be resolved. That's what I honestly thought.
And so once it happened, once they got you, once you were in jail, and then your trial came, and the witnesses that lied while you were trying to plead your case, what do you think, like, they found out later why they lied exactly, but why do you think that situation happened to you? What is it that you did that you think would promote people to do that to you?
Well, that's at times what I had to question. I mean, I would question this in the solitude of myself. I say, no, am I such a bad person that this would happen to me? I mean, wow, I've never killed nobody in my life. Why am I being charged with murder? Why do I have a life sentence? I would ask that, but I had no answer as I was just bewildered with these witnesses lying. I didn't know the reasons or the motivations why they were doing it. I just knew they were wrong, and which is why I wasn't scared to take the stand and testify on my behalf, along with my friends and even 3 friends of the deceased who said I wasn't the one who shot their best friend.
And then as they came out, as the witnesses said that they had lied, that this isn't really what happened, even though that's what they said at the trial, why did it take so many times for your appeal to work? Why do you think that it took many, many times and many people to admit that that's when it happened? Right.
Well, there's consequences. I mean, starting with embarrassment to just even legal ramifications. If it's discovered that on a law enforcement watch, somebody was sent to prison for a crime they did not commit. People could lose their jobs and a number of things. And these are things that I started realizing would be involved in preventing the truth from being, accepted early on. But most importantly also, the judge refused to even test the evidence because he was in the position where at that time when I was convicted in his courtroom and he didn't hear the whole story, he too was cheated, along with a jury, out of the truth, which was misrepresented by the prosecutor. And I felt that when these witnesses recanted and we had other accompanying evidence of my innocence, he should have opened up the proceedings to test it, to see the veracity of it all. He didn't do that because, again, in his own courtroom, an innocent man was convicted. That was the only thing I was left to assume.
Now you are taking this message on the road, you're doing some public speaking, you're trying to tell others and students. Why do you want to share your story?
Well, I want to share my story because What happened to me shouldn't happen to anyone else. It shouldn't happen to your loved one. It shouldn't happen to any person out in the world, particularly if you didn't commit a crime. It's just a horrible experience. And so I want to help reform the system. I want to educate people about factors that lead to the innocent being incarcerated. I want to inspire people to realize that with every adversity that they face, that they can overcome adversity, because I overcame a great level of adversity. I want to I want to help the youth, anyone who can listen to me, to help make better decisions about their life and not take their freedom for granted and cherish every moment. And that's what I deliver in my messages.
Have you seen any response to your messages? What have you heard from the people that you talked to? Was there did anyone feel uplifted from the story that you're telling?
Absolutely. My story has had a global impact, in fact, ranging from in America, I've had prosecutors tell me that from that point on, they're going to be more careful. I've had law students who are going to become prosecutors tell me the same. I've had students change their majors into criminal justice to make a difference. When I traveled to Germany and I spoke before the police department, the police officers told me they were going to be more careful. In different countries where I speak, they tell me that they're inspired, that they thought they had problems and that now that they could overcome it after hearing my story, particularly the love that my wife and I shared through our incarceration and how she endured her suffering and how we prevailed.
Can you talk a little bit about your family life now? What was your family like when you got into prison, and then how was it afterwards?
Well, my family life began with my parents, and then soon after I met my wife, and she became a strong supporter of me because she believed in my innocence. She moved from the Midwest all the way to New York City. I mean, if that's not a Harlequin romance, I don't know what is. Because she believed in my innocence, and she began supporting me, and we had children together. And she would come see me in prison and give me inspiration while holding down the fort, as it were. And in prison, I sought to be a family person, a family man, taking care of my kids. Even though I was limited to what I can do as a father in prison, I sought to do the best I could. For example, I sold clothes while in prison. I used my first business degree earned in prison to buy clothing wholesale, and then I would retail it in prison to prisoners in order to send money home so that my wife could help support herself and the children. Now, it wasn't enough as she faced poverty, but at least I was doing my part whenever I could. So being a family man is very important. Today, I am the school chaperone at my children's school, taking them to the Hartford Science Center. And I just am involved in their life and the martial arts and so much else to promote their well-being and character development.
Now, when you mentioned a degree that you earned while you were in prison, I think that's a very interesting concept for students that are here now. They're studying, they're getting their degree.
Yes.
Could you talk about what the experience was like, especially for students to imagine this is how it is like for me to get my degree, and how was it like for you?
Well, I think that it doesn't matter on where exactly you get your degree. It counts on what you put into your degree as an individual. That's what makes a degree worth more than any Ivy League or anything. It's what you put into it and what you make out of that degree with the inspiration and imagination that you develop from the education you receive at any institution. And in short, what it did for me was that it opened up possibilities. I realized that I had a coping mechanism while in prison through education, and then an opportunity to complete my bachelor's degree when I got out in connection with the Hudson Link Higher Education Program, which partially helped fund my education while I was incarcerated.
Because I would like to ask your wife some questions after, if we can talk a little bit more about your family now. You mentioned your wife was very supportive through the whole process, though she had to deal with so much at home.
Yes.
Talk about the support, or what, did she visit you, or I don't know how the communication was limited,
Yes.
or what was that like?
Well, we were limited to seeing each other. I mean, I lived far away from where she lived. I mean, I was in New York State, she lived in Connecticut, and it was always an issue in terms of the distance and the economics, not to mention the humiliation. She had to pass through metal detectors where at times they requested that she be strip searched when it was just underwire in wiring in her bra that sounded the metal detector. So it was very difficult for her to bring the children and changing their diapers and everything like that. But even on a family level, in terms of development and soundness, it affected my family in a negative way because my parents today still think that I'm supposed to be a 22-year-old who was arrested in 91 when in fact I'm a grown man with a wife and children trying to be responsible and trying to eke out a living. And they just have some resentment. So this is a situation where post-traumatic stress disorder has affected me, yes, my family, but also my parents who need counseling and haven't sought it yet.
And now you are being very public about your story. You're not trying to hide it. You're not trying to apply for a job and not mention that this occurred or something. You're very public about it. Now, when you are meeting people and maybe people in your hometown when they heard about that you were arrested first, how are people treating you now? Is anyone still treating you like they think you're a murderer? Is everyone just happy that you're out, or what has the reaction been?
Well, this was, I tell you, a resounding victory in the Latino community. I mean, I grew up in Washington Heights, a predominantly Dominican neighborhood, and throughout the years, I had media supporting me from 1992 all the way to 2009 and beyond when I was released. And this was a resounding victory for the Latino community because they felt that the youth, the person who was arrested from their community, who got a bad deal, now got a victory, and everyone just was so happy about it that they felt it happened to them. And so they've been very supportive about this. The Latino community has remained very supportive of what happened to me. And it's just been a positive impression for them.
So you haven't had any difficulty with people? Have you reached anyone who's saying that they don't trust you because of what happened before, even though the legal system cleared you?
Yes.
Do people trust you?
Yes, yes. I haven't had an issue. I mean, let's talk about trust. I was once in a courtroom as a criminal defendant. Now I'm actually lecturing in Hartford and New Haven federal district courts before federal judges who invite me in their courtroom to speak to people who have been incarcerated and are on federal probation in order to help them make good decisions. So I think that's a level of trust. I mean, if a federal judge invites me to speak.
What do you think could be improved about the justice system to help the situation not happen again? I know that's something you want to stop it from happening, but what do you think could be done?
Well, I think that we need to hold corrupt prosecutors like James G. Rodriguez, the prosecutor responsible in my case, accountable. He knew the evidence from the beginning, and he sought not to investigate, as well as, according to all the witnesses and documented evidence we have, he coerced and threatened the witnesses into falsely testifying against me. We also need a level of accountability for police departments who don't enact proper protocol with mistaken eyewitness identification reforms, which are the leading cause of why people land in prison. So we need to enact better safeguards to protect identification procedures as well. Those are two major things that I think we need to address.
And one more feeling of yours that I want to know about is when you were cleared and then you stepped out and you had your supporters cheering there, what was it like for you?
It was amazing. It was surreal. It was an out-of-body experience in a good sense, unlike the time I was found guilty, which was totally negative. But I was scared. I was fearful. I mean, the world had changed so much with the technology, 21st century technology, which I had not been accustomed to. The world had changed from the internet now existing to MP3s and iPads and all this type of stuff. Fashion had changed so much. I was just totally scared, really, and I couldn't stop eating food, trying to adjust because food in prison was so horrible. It just took me a lot to adjust, and I'm still adjusting today, but it's a good feeling, and it's one that I'm working into my life every day for greater enjoyment through therapy.
You talked a little bit about what you're doing at this time, but in a very serious way. You're speaking, what you're doing with your family. How about on a lighter note, are there things that you missed that you were hoping to do, like a certain vacation or something you want to do with your kids, something that you've been able to do now that you missed but you're very happy you're able to do now?
Absolutely. I mean, I take my kids on things that I've never done before, which I yearn to do while incarcerated, such as pumpkin picking. I take them to the Hartford Science Center, where I chaperone the elementary school, and I tell the kids, let's run up the stairs, no elevators, to promote fitness. I take them on field trips, and I just interact with the kids. So I love doing that. I love just being a dad to my kids, taking them to their martial art lessons at nighttime, Tuesdays and Thursdays. I love being a husband to my wife and taking her out on dates. We didn't get to date when I was incarcerated. Now we can go out.
I'm
As if
sure
we're
that's exciting.
newlyweds. And it's very exciting because we can go out and have a dinner together like normal human people should. You know, I'm living my life now in ways that I should have lived a long time ago.
Well, thank you very much for sharing the very intense details of that. I think that a lot of people find that fascinating if they haven't heard of it before, and I appreciate your time.
Well, you're welcome, and I really hope that I can continue speaking at different schools and that other schools would contact me and that I can help them develop their students to be agents of change for the better.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.